All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and happy Monday to everybody. My name is Joe Macbeth and I am the Executive Director of the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning for using the power of language to increase self-esteem and social standing with today's special guest teacher, Tom McCluskey. Tom's an old friend of NADSP's and currently works as the Director of Quality Improvement at New Horizons Resources in Pleasant Valley, New York. But Tom is also one of our traveling faculty members at NADSP who teaches a lot of informed decision making and other things that we do. So I am looking forward to Tom's presentation. Before I turn it over to Tom, I just want to give you a little bit more information about these webinars. This is the 6th of 8 webinar series that we're doing in conjunction with the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities and their regional centers for workforce transformation. This project is funded through the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, the DDPC, and we will be sending everybody who is on this webinar an email with a very short evaluation, and we ask that you take just a couple minutes to fill it out. Because it is a grant-funded project, we do need to show our funders that we're doing this and what you all think about it. So just take a couple minutes to fill out that very brief survey. And I also want to let everybody know that for those of you who can't be here live, you're not actually hearing me speak right now, but this will be archived on the Workforce Transformation website that we'll share with you later on today. And lastly, we have a bunch of upcoming webinars. Our next webinar will be on July 11th, another Workforce Transformation webinar with Perry Samowitz on supervision and the role of frontline supervisors in this whole transformation to introduce the Code of Ethics, introduce the core competencies, understanding the performance evaluation tool. And Perry will be doing a webinar on July 11th. We're really happy on July 12th to have another Let's Talk webinar with Dave Hingsberger and our special guest, Dr. Yona Lunsky. That's July 12th. July 14th, we have our Learning Annex webinar with another NADSP faculty member, Jennifer Parsons, on diversity awareness. And then lastly, this is new, my friend Letitia Alcorn will be doing a workforce transformation, a New York State OPWDD workforce transformation on self-advocacy and self-advocates understanding this process of transforming the workforce. With all of that, I am going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Tom McCluskey. Tom, welcome, and thank you.
Thank you, Joe. As you know, this webinar today is on using the power of language. So using the introduction, was that I'm old and a friend or an old friend?
You're an old friend, Tom, a long-time friend.
Because I may have, the need to increase my self-esteem and social standing. But that was just a good illustration of the topic for today. Thank you.
And my apologies. Thank you, Tom.
None needed. Okay, so again, just a brief overview for those of you that were with us a couple weeks ago. I won't belabor all this, but this is just my background so that you know where I'm coming from. I've worked in the field for quite a while. I'm seasoned as a DSP, frontline supervisor, and a trainer. So I just want to talk about the language that we're using, and it does come from a couple places that we need to be aware of. My work in particular has evolved to where I see us as more civil rights workers than human service workers. So one sentiment that I think is key to how I think and hopefully other workers think is the people that we support are fine just the way they are. Humans come in a wide spectrum. People with disabilities are part of that spectrum. They are equal citizens. We should accept them as such, and the efforts of our work should no longer be on changing who they are, but changing other people's acceptance and perception of who they are. That's not unique to me, and it may not necessarily be my thoughts expressly, but you can see more along that line on disabilityisnatural.com, a website that I would recommend heavily for you to look at for all types of resources. So I want to start with a little sticks and stones. May break my bones, and we know the rest, but names will never hurt me. Now that's a highly technical term, that bullshit, so let me come back to that. So we know that language is powerful. Words are powerful. Some of you just had reactions to the word bullshit. A couple of you signed off, I see. Others are laughing. Others are in amazement. But words themselves evoke emotion and feelings among people. So the ones that we use at work have the same effect. So words are powerful, and we have to recognize that in our work, that therefore language is one of the tools that we have. As human beings, we place a value on everything. As an example, let's do a little free association. Cadillac, Pinto. Mansion, trailer. Garbage man, doctor. We've been conditioned to put a value on everything and to have extremes, positive ends, negative ends of those expressions. And we have been conditioned to put a value on people, whether it's by ethnicity or their income level or where they live. It's just part of the human condition. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but it is. And until we recognize some universal truths, like we place value on everything and words are powerful, then we're not able to fulfill our mission, which I believe most of us work for agencies that talk about supporting people to achieve full citizenship and full membership in their communities or in our communities. So we do place a value on everything. A lot of people wonder about person-first language. Can we train staff how to use person-first language? For those of you that are from New York today, we know that competency number 1, skill number 1, task number 2 is about using person-first language. So there is some thought and some exercise and some recognition in how we can be respectful when it's necessary to refer to the people we support and their disability, and it's to put the person first. So it's a person who uses a wheelchair, not someone who's wheelchair bound. Well, today I'm not going to talk a lot about person first language. I want to talk instead about why it's important, not necessarily the how. But I will, for those of you that are interested, give you a reference later. So the NADSP Code of Ethics in the preamble, my favorite part of the Code of Ethics, talks about the primary purpose of a DSP is to assist people who need support to lead self-directed lives and to participate fully in our communities and nation. This emphasis on empowerment and participation is critical because the prejudices of society form powerful barriers that prevent many people with intellectual disabilities and others from enjoying a quality of life. Right. So the NADSP code recognizes that prejudices from society are one of the biggest barriers that we have in our work and that we must overcome. And I would propose to you that language is both something that we need to be careful of and something that we can use as a tool to overcome some of those stereotypes. So what are some of those stereotypes or prejudices that society has? I will promise you that I will not sing. But this is a song that might be familiar to some of you. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you're 6, 7, or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. And I believe that society does carefully teach to not value some members of our society as much as others. I'm not going to blame it on our relatives per se, but society as a whole has a core set of values, and people that live outside of those core set of values are more in danger of being spun off to the outside of society and not enjoy the access to quality indicators that people who live closer to the values of, say, youth, health, wealth might have. So Rodgers and Hammerstein certainly nailed it in the lyrics. Now, as humans, I said we place a value on everything. I think it's a survivalist skill. It's something that we have to recognize. If you're not buying this completely, I'd invite you to go to the website listed here, implicitharvard.edu. It's an opportunity for you to take a quick little test on the computer and to see if you might have low, moderate, or high levels of bias against certain groups of people. And there are a multitude of tests that you can take on there, one of which is towards people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You go on, you spend 5 or 10 minutes taking their test, and they'll give you a little bit of insight into how you've been raised, what's happening at your unconscious level. These aren't things that we think about on a daily basis, and I think that's what makes it so hard for us to recognize or to overcome, that the prejudice has been planted in there and it gets reinforced, but we're unaware of it. So we have to watch out for that subliminal training or conditioning that we've been prone to or exposed to as a member of our society. Again, for those of you familiar with me, I've heavily been influenced by social role valorization and the work of Dr. Wolfensberger. So he suggests, and I agree to various degrees, that there are some classic stereotypes that we've been trained to think about people with disabilities and that are embedded in our unconsciousness. And today, because we're focusing on language only, I'll try to give examples that have to do with the language end, although these can also be seen in our settings, in our models, in our activities as well. So less than human, you may have unfortunately heard at times when people that we've supported, particularly those who have been expressing themselves through physical activity or aggression, that they're monsters, they're animal-like. When we look at sick, we still hear things like patience and therapy. If you have a disability and you like music, you get music therapy. The rest of us just listen to music. They go to places that are day treatments, so it implies that there's something about them that needs to be changed or treated. So again, in menace, when we talk about violent, dangerous, monster-like objects, I'm sure that you've heard this as well, but I cringe when I hear somebody say, I'm going to go pick up the wheelchairs from program, because I'm really concerned about how off are now going to get home if somebody takes their wheelchairs from them. So people that we support have been delegated to being called cases or beds or slots or the Willowbrook, all kinds of terms or objects And sometimes it's not that blatant. It might be more subtle, like they're mine and possessive. Again, it's not, this phenomenon is not exclusive to our work. If any of you have ever been in the hospital, you lose your identity in hospital. You're the kidney in room 212. And then when people come to see you, the kidney is what they're interested in, not necessarily you as a person. Objects of pity, when we talk about the poor, unfortunate people that we work for, or the worthy cause of our work, or people being victims of certain diagnosis, or even the reverse, the super GIMP, the people who overcome great obstacles, and their achievement is blown out and magnified because of their disability, as opposed to just being a normal person. I'm sorry, normal is not a great word, being treated as you and I. We see last year there was the news when the Fashion Week, one of the models had Down syndrome. And while that's wonderful and a great newsworthy event in this time and age, I long for the day when that is not newsworthy. That the fact that someone has an extra chromosome and is a model doesn't rise to the level that it needs to be reported in the paper. And the last one I want to talk about today is the people being treated as if they're younger or childlike. I am involved in supporting a self-advocacy group, and when I told them that I'd be doing the seminar, I asked them what they wanted me to tell DSPs in particular about the power of language, and they were quite clear. And they said, tell them not to treat us as children. Don't tease us, don't taunt us, don't boss us around, don't treat us as children. But in our work, we'll hear lovingly terms about boys and girls when we're referring to adults, or my boys or my girls, which become possessive. And when we talk to staff about this, they don't quite understand that for the people that we're supporting, they're at greater risk of these being wounding experiences for them, of these being hurtful to their self-esteem and their social standing, because they may call their friends by the same exact words. And while that may be true, the people that we are supporting have been the victims of social prejudice, and they're closer to the breaking point than most of ours. So that one extra comment, that one extra time might be the one that really shatters the self-esteem or the standing. As we started today's, Joe introduced me as Tom McCluskey, and that certainly is my name, but if I were receiving services, despite my seasoned nature, I'm sure that I would be referred to as Tommy. We tend to use the diminutive names for people who might, perhaps more appropriately, be referred to as Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Jones to show some respect and social standings. But we tend to use language and activities to treat people as if they're younger than they are. And it comes at some cost. It reinforces those negative stereotypes that we've been conditioned to believe. The people we support have had the same conditioning, so it reinforces how they believe about themselves. So one of our jobs is to support the public in changing their perception of people with disabilities. And because we came from the public, we have an understanding of what some of the issues are. So again, person-first language quickly would be putting the person before the disability, right? So a person with an intellectual disability. One of the main purposes of person-first language is it emphasizes what we have in common, and we want to build communities of people that have like-minded interests and hobbies. So person-first language is a tool that we can use towards that end. Again, if you want to learn more about that, get examples, complete charts, or maybe even take the Person First Language Pledge, I recommend that you go to disabilityis.org that should be natural, I'm sorry, disabilityisnatural.com, the work of Kathy Snow. All right, so again, in the NADSP Code of Ethics, there's the promoting physical and emotional well-being. And I think this is another one of the tenets that doesn't get enough play. The emotional well-being of the people we support is something that we need to be conscious of. It's potentially very fragile. We need to constantly be aware of the self-esteem of the people that we're supporting and how our actions and our words impact how they feel about themselves at any given time. And of course, that physical and emotional well-being is built on a relationship that's respectful, based on mutual trust. So over the years as a trainer, I'd like to tell people that they're in the self-esteem elevator business. It's our job to help people feel better about themselves. So one measure of our success then might be, after every interaction we have with someone, to step back and reflect. Does the person feel better or worse about themselves after just having had that interaction with me? Okay, so being a self-esteem elevator, because the people we support have been bombarded by these images and messages about people with disability and society as well, and they're fully aware that their life experience is different than yours and mine, and many want the same life experiences that you and I have, that one of the first places we have to start is self-esteem. So how people feel about themselves, I believe, comes from two factors. It's one, how they feel about themselves at any given moment in time, based on their self-sense, and also based on the feedback that they're getting from the environment around them at any given time. And that all of us constantly readjust our self-esteem based on those two factors, how I feel about myself and the messages I'm getting about me from the community at large. So one of our conscious goals then has to be to help people feel better about themselves, because unless we recognize that those forces of prejudice are real, unless we recognize that subconsciously sometimes we're in danger of reinforcing some negative impact on people, we can't move forward. So we have to be aware of being self-esteem elevators and how the feedback loop works with people. Another part about the preamble that goes on the second paragraph after talking about social prejudice is that too often the very social policies and service systems designed to help can create barriers. And we saw that reflected in some of the language that I just shared with you about day treatments and beds and slots and those types of things. So let me tell you a little story about, what do we call them in parentheses for a moment. This goes back several years, and if any of you are trainers, you know that we steal stories. So it will forever be my story, even if it was somebody else's first. But a coworker of mine told me this story. There was a gentleman who was leaving the nursing home where he lived to come and move into a group home at the agency where we work. So they were having his discharge meeting at the nursing home. And at the nursing home, the person conducting the discharge meeting had suggested that when Paul leaves, he should come back and visit his neighbors. And she stopped and said, "Neighbors, that's what we call the people here. What do you call them?" So my friend who was there for the agency thought for a moment. She said, "Well, they're people. We call them by their names." And Paul didn't miss this. Paul instantly said, "Great, I get to be a person now." So certainly Paul told us what many of us already know, that the people we support are quite aware of the situation and the prejudices of society and the opportunities to move on. But what do we call them? Now, there are lots of words that have been used over time, whether it's patient, client, consumer, individuals being the new trendy one, right? But all of these words, if we're the human service worker, the civil rights worker, if we're the DSP and we're in the job of inclusion and helping people belong, all of these words only mean one thing: not us. So anytime that we have an us and them mentality, language, service system, it flies in the face of our mission of supporting people to be equal partners and citizens in society. So one of my pet peeves is these peer interaction goals. You know, when I'm cynical, those are interpreted as having for somebody to go, quote, quote, hang out with their own kind. It's an acknowledgement that we're not their kind. If we're in citizenship and equality, there is only an us. There should be no us in them, in our language, in our practices, in our activities. At work, inside of agencies, there should be very little need to talk about the labels or the diagnosis of the people that we support. Right? We know that HIPAA tells us that we have to keep all of these things top secret, but we already know once you're at work, everybody that we support has a disability. Otherwise, they would not have qualified to be there for our help. So why do we have to perpetuate it? Why do we have to keep bringing it up? I would suggest that we talk about it far too often and it enters far too many conversations. So people we support are much more like us than they are different. Right? So again, we want to use that person-first language, that language that emphasizes things that bring us into community, likeness, sameness, not those that separate us. So language is important, and it's important because prejudice exists. And again, I went through this with you because I believe that if we don't understand the why, then the how is just political correctness. So the acknowledgement that prejudice exists and that we have the potential to be prejudiced and that we've been programmed to be prejudiced is a core step in supporting people to have better self-esteem and to increase their social standing. Okay? So I think many of you are familiar with the golden rule of first aid, and that should be first aid, not fist aid. Do no further harm. Right? So one of the very first things that we want to do as we move forward is to stop using languages, practices, activities that demean people, that are harmful to their self-esteem, that negatively impact their social standing. We want to stop the negative branding. We want to stop reinforcing the negative reputations that have followed people over the years. In our self-advocacy group, I'm recalling my friend Ed, who has been unemployed for many years, and because he was not quite so successful in his last couple job, quote, quote, placements for supportive employment. And he said, you know, I don't think I'll ever get a job again because that book, my history, my past, it follows me around forever. You make a mistake once and people don't let you forget or get over it. So he's, you know, a brand of being difficult to support in supportive employment, perhaps even perceived to be unappreciative, and perhaps maybe move to the back of the line because maybe other people are more deserving. And then not only do we have to stop the negative branding, we have to purposely, positively brand, use language that's empowering and enticing. Instead of clients, what if you introduce people as your employer or your boss? Aren't those true? Aren't those realities? Isn't that a different social standing? one that shake people's foundations of the assumptions that they've made. Business knows this, the power of language. Probably the most famous case for those of you that have long memories is the Chevy Nova. The Chevy Nova did not do so well in Spanish-speaking countries because it meant doesn't go. So people don't make that mistake in business anymore. There's lots of research time spent in positively branding. So we can positively brand, we can upgrade people's perception, we can set the stage for increased opportunity for a person that we support or a group of people that we support through some thoughtful, deliberate use of powerful language. As I'm speaking on this, it reminds me that as we're developing DSPs, particularly those that are going towards their credential, there are two skills that we see in the best of DSPs, whether they're credentialed or not. And the first skill is that they work with intention. They know what it is that they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. They've broken out of the routine of today is Monday, we pick people up from program, we go out food shopping, and Joe does his laundry because today is Monday. But they know within each interaction and for each person what it is that the person desires and what it is that the person wants, and how is it that my actions today with intention are going to help that person. And then the other skill is reflection, for them to have the ability to self-reflect on their own actions or those of the team or the agency, and how effective were my actions today? How effective was that interaction that I made today? You'll notice I thought about this morning when we talk about implicit prejudice, and I apologize for this, but most of my examples tend to go to males first. Don't take that as a prejudice, but maybe it's my conditioning that I need to be aware of and overcome. So language, again, is a tool. I think it's a window to our soul. Just run through these quickly. They, we know the power of the media and making words say different things. So, it's not a jail. It's a correctional facility. I have one in my backyard. Here's quite a few different terms. Differently abled instead of disabled. I didn't steal it. It fell off the back of a truck. Instead of homeless, right? It's on the streets. And then passed away instead of these other examples of different ways in which dying or murder can be described so that they don't seem as dreadful as they are. I'm sure that if you're looking at the last one, friendly fire is as painful as unfriendly fire. Now, we can use the opposite. That's the negative, the down end, trying to hide things. But language also has the positive end, right? So, environmental engineer or sanitation worker, right? And words we hear a lot now, pre-owned as opposed to used, repurposed instead of recycled, re-engineered, reimagined. Language is a powerful tool of the message that people receive. And as I said before, perhaps the people that pay you are your employer or your boss. So we have the opportunity to choose which words that we use at work, and perhaps an obligation to use words that aren't harmful and that perhaps are even helpful. A couple other areas in the code where there'll be some references, of course. Person-centered, integrity and responsibility, recognizing the importance of modeling valued behaviors to coworkers and the community at large. So how do we challenge our coworkers or others when they are operating on misperceptions, when they're using language that perhaps hurts somebody's social standing or self-esteem? So respect will recognize each person as valuable, will interact with each person in a respectful manner, and will provide opportunities and supports to help the people you support be viewed with respect and treated as full members of our communities. So language exerts hidden power. We don't necessarily see it, but it's like the moon on the tides. There's definitely a correlation, a cause and effect that comes from our language and how people see, view, perceive, and interact with people that surround us, whether it's at work or not. Language is one of those tools. So words matter. Choose yours very purposefully. Please don't take this next statement as a political endorsement, but our friend Donald Trump said, "I know words. I have the best words. I have the best words." I won't go on to what he was talking about in that because he used a not so nice word right after that. So words do matter. So going forward, and in a brief summary of the material that we've talked about, I think we need to first become conscious. Do words matter? What do have I been conditioned to feel about the people we support? How does that not be consistent with the language that I use? Do no further harm. Make sure that we stop referring to people as clients, that we stop having the us and them language, that we don't belittle people, that we treat people with the respect that they deserve, that it's Mrs. Jones and not Sally, that we can use language to enhance. Be a self-esteem elevator consciously. Think about how will this be received on the other end? How will it impact how they feel about themselves? We have an obligation to educate others that are around us, whether it's our coworkers or families. I don't know, we're in graduation season, so I don't know how you're going to handle those family gatherings when people in our families use words that aren't respectful or have opinions about our work. And do we take those opportunities to help people understand that what they've been led to believe about the people we support is wrong? And do we take that opportunity to create a more welcoming world for people to educate our family members and other community members of what they're missing out when they don't include the people that we support as part of their communities? I'd encourage you to choose your words wisely. That's the problem with words. Once they're out there, you can't take them back. The feelings they've invoked, the responses they've had, can't be retracted. A simple apology won't set the stage straight. And then I'd encourage all of us to use our best words. When we have words for any situation, there's the full spectrum. We can use words that aren't useful. We can use words that are good, better, best, and ideal. So all of those are opportunities for us to help people feel better about themselves and to help other people see the people that we support equally as full citizens. If you have an interest and an agreement in the way that I'm talking, again, it's disabilityisnatural.com. Rolling around in my head, David Hinsberger's blog is something that I read as frequently as I can to keep me honest and a fresh perspective of the work that we do and the prejudice that people experience every day in community life. And of course, NADSP.org are on Facebook. So I'd be willing to open it up to questions at this point, Joe or Tanya?
Tom, thank you so much. I mean, it's always a good reminder to have a conversation about the words that we use. And I don't know if we have any questions. I invite people to type in some questions. I have a couple real quick comments before we go on. we interact with a lot of direct support professionals, and we talk about, their work in the community. And I often say that the office for a direct support professional is the community. That's where we do our work. But that we use that word like it's like a Disney destination. Well, we're going out into the community, right? Let's get ready. We're going into the community, and really that we should stop saying that. I think because like if you and I decide to go out to dinner next weekend, we're not going to say, "Hey, Joe, let's go to the community." We're going to say, "Let's go to the dinner, out to dinner," right?
Right, and only in our work is the word outing a good thing.
Exactly. And the other thing is, I've been, ever since we had a posting on the NADSP's Facebook page about the language that we use, I've become a lot more sensitive to it, and I don't know if it's something that we're going to be able to see significant change unless everybody makes a commitment to use good, respectful language on a daily basis. I see it as more evolutionary because organizations have culture, right? And if you work in this organization, we refer to the people that we support as clients, or we refer to them as residents, or we refer to them as participants, rather than by their names, as you mentioned earlier. And I do think that, culture change is slow. However, given that, I think everybody's familiar with the R-word campaign and how wildly popular that is, and nobody will say the R-word in my presence without me, scolding them. So, I mean, how would an organization begin to adopt a more respectful culture of language is my question to you.
Well, I think you had some great insight there, Joe, and that's why I chose to take this approach as opposed to giving a lecture on person first language, because it really is about our values and our beliefs, and it's the values and beliefs that need to be instilled. We need to hire people for values and beliefs and teach skills. You can't hire for skills and teach values and beliefs. And as you said, it will take an evolution, but all wars are won one battle at a time. But if we're silent and we don't take the opportunities that are presented to us, whether it's in our daily work, whether it's at our own agencies, then we won't make any progress. And again, I'm not perfect. I'm sure I made several slip-ups during this presentation. But it's something that takes a conscious effort, that it's important, and it's important because it is our mission for people to be viewed as citizens. They are already citizens. It's the how they're perceived that is the problem. And our language is one way that we have to do that. But I have the same discomfort at work. I'll be sitting in high-level meetings, and do I interrupt people again, or will I just be known as the word police? Because the words, as I said before, are a reflection of what's in our soul, and it's our soul that matters.
Right.
And it's the soul that we have to develop for the work to have the greater purpose.
Right. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, the word police or the language police. I've been accused of that, myself. But, it just seems that somebody has to be. And then we'll say, well, we're just being politically correct. Is this the politically correct language that we should be using today? And I refer back to people, when I started working in this field around the same time as you, we used far different language than we use today. Look at some of the records that the people that we support have in their files, and their diagnosis was far different than it is today. So yeah, it is going to change. There is an evolution, and I believe that direct support professionals, I'm so glad you brought up the integrity responsibility tenet of the code, because there is a responsibility for direct support professionals to use respectful language 24 hours a day.
Even if it's not being modeled in their agencies.
Yes.
It has to be in the relationships that they have with people, which is the basis for our agencies and the work. There's nothing outside of that relationship.
That's absolutely right. Any other questions? Anybody? Anything coming in? I don't see. Oh, hold on. We may have one here. I'll read it to you, Tom.
Okay.
Agencies defend their use of the word consumer or client, quote unquote, saying that is the language recognized by the state, their billing processes, etc. How is it possible to change language at higher levels of bureaucracy? Great question. Tom?
Well, first I think we have to be conscious of it. We have to bring it up. We have to address it. We have to correct it each and every time we go. No civil rights movements in this country had been successful. All of the past prejudices had been legal. It starts with somebody objecting to and standing up for people. And again, perhaps they don't understand the deeper meaning of words and how it impacts folks. Again, I'd refer them back to our mission. I don't think there's an agency around who doesn't have in their mission for people to be full citizens in our communities. And if we're using language that differentiates, then how can we be including people? So we have to challenge it. We have to have those discussions. You have to be the great example consistently. Maybe you need to be the word police in your agency, but you have to find people who understand the issue the same as you, who will commit with you to making those changes as you go forward. You know, whether it's consumer or individual, that's just a trend. It's just political correctness until we realize it's people just like you and I.
Yeah. And the only thing that I could add is a wonderful question. You know, not too long ago, New York State Office was far different. The name of the state office was OMRDD. And today it's OPWDD because of advocacy, because of people were offended by the MR in a state office. So,
and, yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, New York was 49th in changing the R word, always a leader.
Well, to their credit, they did it, and that just goes to show that, you know, advocacy works. And I think as Clarence Sundrum says, you know, advocacy never ends. Advocacy work never ends. So I do think that the people that we support, the family members, direct support professionals, that trinity that I speak of a lot, really needs to keep the language issue front and center. And I'm so glad that you spent 50 minutes talking about it, Tom. It was great. Anything else? Any final words, Tom?
No final words from me. I would be interested in people's feedback, whether you agree or not. So please contact me at tmccluskey2@Yahoo or through NADSP.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Tanya, behind the scenes as always, wonderful job. Before you go, I just want to remind you all, July 11th at 11 a.m., Workforce Transformation with OPWDD on supervision with Perry Samowitz. July 12th at 2 p.m., the great Dave Hingsberger and Dr. Yona Lunsky will be doing a Let's Talk webinar. July 14th at 2 p.m., Diversity Awareness with NADSP faculty member Jen Parsons, and then a special treat on July 25th, Letitia Alcorn, a huge advocate and supporter for direct support professionals, will be finishing up this series of webinars with OPWDD. So with that, Tom, thank you so much once again. We hope to talk with you all soon. Have a great work week. Bye.